The young man had always lived a simple life in Virginia, working multiple odd jobs just to get by. His days were spent fixing cars at a local garage, delivering groceries, and doing whatever he could to keep his small rented apartment. He had never traveled far from home, but on this rare occasion, his friends had convinced him to take a short trip to California for a weekend getaway. It was a luxury he could barely afford, but he agreed, thinking it might be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. As he strolled along the beach, the golden sun casting a warm glow over the waves, he took a deep breath of the salty air, letting himself forget his worries for a moment. He watched families laughing, children building sandcastles, and surfers riding the waves. It was a different world from what he knew, filled with people who seemed carefree and unburdened by financial struggles. Just as he was about to turn away, a scream pierced the air. His eyes darted toward the ocean, where he spotted a girl struggling against the relentless waves. Her arms flailed as she gasped for breath, disappearing beneath the surface before re-emerging in a frantic struggle. People on the shore noticed, but no one reacted fast enough. Without a second thought, he sprinted toward the water, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Diving into the waves, he fought against the powerful current, his muscles burning as he pushed forward. Years of swimming in Virginia's rivers had made him strong, but the ocean was a different challenge altogether. He reached her just as she was about to go under again. Wrapping an arm around her, he kicked hard, using every ounce of strength to keep them both afloat. She coughed and sputtered, too weak to hold on, but he refused to let her slip away. Slowly, he made his way back toward the shore, his body aching from the effort. The waves crashed against them, but he held on, determined to save her. By the time he reached the shallow waters, a few beachgoers had rushed to help, pulling her onto the sand. He collapsed beside her, breathless, as someone called for medical assistance. With shaking hands, he turned her onto her side, gently patting her back until she coughed up the water. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. He had saved her life, yet he felt no need for thanks or recognition. He was just relieved she was breathing. As the paramedics arrived, he stepped back, watching as they checked her vitals. He was ready to disappear into the crowd, not wanting any attention. But before he could leave, the girl reached out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Wait, please." Something in her expression made him pause. He had no idea who she was, no clue that this moment would change his life forever. Still catching his breath, he watched as the girl slowly sat up, her body trembling from the shock. The color was returning to her pale face, and her wide eyes filled with a mix of fear, gratitude, and disbelief. She turned to look at him, taking in the exhausted, soaked figure who had just saved her life. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky. You saved me." He simply nodded, brushing his wet hair back, not knowing what to say. He had never been one for grand gestures or expecting recognition. To him, it was just the right thing to do. He had seen someone in trouble, and he had acted. That was all. She reached out, as if to hold on to something stable, and he instinctively offered his hand to help her stand. The crowd around them had grown, with some people murmuring about the incident while others pulled out their phones. The sound of approaching sirens echoed in the air, signaling the arrival of paramedics. "You should sit down," he said, his voice low but steady. "Let them check you out." She hesitated, as if she wanted to say something more, but then gave a small nod. The medics rushed to her side, shining a flashlight in her eyes, asking her questions, and wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. As they worked, he stepped back, blending into the background. He had done what he could. Now, it was time for him to go. Just as he turned to leave, she suddenly called out, "Wait." He stopped, looking over his shoulder. "What's your name?" she asked, her expression earnest. He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Daniel." She opened her mouth to say something else, but before she could, the paramedics insisted she get into the ambulance. She gave him one last look before disappearing into the vehicle. He exhaled and ran a hand through his damp hair, shaking his head. It had been a long day, and all he wanted now was to go somewhere quiet. What he didn't realize was that this girl was no ordinary stranger. She was the daughter of one of California's wealthiest millionaires, a name well known in business and social circles. The people watching from the sidelines knew who she was, and whispers had already begun spreading. As Daniel walked away, unaware of the storm that was about to hit his simple life, his only thoughts were about getting dry and maybe finding a place to rest. He had no idea that by morning, his name would be on every news channel, his face all over social media, and that his act of selflessness would lead him into a world he never imagined being part of. The news of the dramatic rescue spread quickly. By the next morning, headlines flashed across social media, newspapers, and television screens. Brave young man saves millionaire's daughter from drowning. The world was eager to know more about the mysterious hero who had vanished soon after the rescue. It wasn't long before the girl's family, one of the wealthiest and most influential in California, learned about what had happened. Her father, a powerful businessman, was shaken by the thought of how close he had come to losing his only daughter. Gratitude and curiosity drove him to find the man responsible for saving her life. With their vast resources, it didn't take long to track him down. Daniel, still unaware of the storm brewing around him, was at his small apartment, trying to return to normal life. He had no idea that reporters were already outside his building, eager for an interview. Before he could fully process what was happening, a sleek black car pulled up, and two well-dressed men stepped out. "Daniel," one of them asked. He hesitated before nodding. "We represent the Sterling family. Mr. Sterling, the father of the young woman you saved, would like to meet you. He is deeply grateful and wants to thank you in person." Daniel, uncomfortable with attention, was about to decline, but something in their tone made him pause. He had never been inside a billionaire's estate before, and curiosity won over his hesitation. Reluctantly, he agreed. A few hours later, he found himself standing at the gates of a mansion unlike anything he had ever seen. The estate was massive, with fountains, towering palm trees, and cars that probably cost more than his entire neighborhood. He felt out of place but forced himself to stay composed as he was led inside. In a grand hall, Mr. Sterling and his wife greeted him warmly. Their expressions were a mix of gratitude and admiration. The girl, now looking healthier, stood nearby, smiling at him. "Young man," Mr. Sterling said, shaking his hand firmly. "You saved my daughter's life. No amount of gratitude can express what that means to me. Please, allow us to reward you properly." Before Daniel could react, an assistant handed him an envelope. He opened it to find a check with more zeros than he had ever seen in his life. His heart pounded, but he quickly shook his head. "I didn't do it for money," he said simply. Mr. Sterling smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve it. But this isn't just a reward, it's an invitation. We would like you to stay for dinner, get to know us. You're part of our story now." Daniel glanced at the girl, who nodded encouragingly. He took a deep breath, realizing that this meeting might change his life forever. At first, their connection was nothing more than gratitude and formality. She was the daughter of a millionaire, living a life of luxury and privilege, while he was an ordinary young man from Virginia, struggling to make ends meet. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. But fate had its own plans. After the night of their first meeting at her family's estate, Daniel found himself returning a few times, initially out of politeness. Mr. Sterling had taken a keen interest in him, offering him opportunities he never thought possible. A job, connections, even financial support, things that could have changed his life overnight. But Daniel, ever the humble and independent soul, didn't want handouts. He wanted to earn his way forward. What surprised him the most was how much the girl, whose name he now knew was Olivia, wanted to know him beyond the circumstances that brought them together. She wasn't just a spoiled rich girl, as he had first assumed. She was kind, intelligent, and curious about the world outside her privileged bubble. She asked him about his life, his struggles, and his dreams, listening with genuine interest. And in turn, he found himself drawn to her sincerity. Their friendship grew in the most unexpected ways. Olivia, tired of being surrounded by people who only cared about status, found comfort in Daniel's honesty. He treated her like a normal person, not as the daughter of a billionaire. He teased her about things no one else dared to, challenged her views, and showed her a world she had never truly seen before. She, in return, introduced him to experiences he never imagined, fancy events, travel, and a different way of thinking. But no matter how different their backgrounds were, they found common ground in their conversations, their laughter, and their growing trust in each other. Slowly, their bond deepened. They spent more time together, sometimes under the excuse of business, sometimes just because it felt right. They pushed each other to be better. Olivia encouraged Daniel to pursue his dreams fearlessly, while he helped her see life beyond wealth and expectations. Neither of them realized when friendship turned into something more. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was in the small moments, the way she looked at him when he wasn't paying attention, the way he always knew when she needed someone to talk to. It was in the unspoken understanding, in the way their hands brushed against each other and neither pulled away. When they finally acknowledged their feelings, it felt natural, as if it had been inevitable all along. Olivia's family, initially hesitant, saw the change in her, how happy and grounded she had become. And for Daniel, life had taken a turn he never expected. They had come from different worlds, met under extraordinary circumstances, and against all odds, found love where neither had been looking. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. And for them, that was enough.